Hello and welcome to this short video on BluePrint energy auditing software. My name is Chris Dunham, I'm the Managing Director of Carbon Descent. What I'm going to do is give you a brief background presentation and then I'm going to move on to showing you the software itself live. So, a bit of background about us. Carbon Descent, we've been going for 15 years. Hopefully, as the name suggests, we are about reducing carbon emissions. We have 4 software products on sale. BluePrint is just one of those, and we also run consultancy associated with that software generally. So why did we develop BluePrint? Well, we had been doing energy audits ourselves for a number of years, and we felt that the general conventional process for doing energy audits was ripe for improvement. And this is the process that you might be familiar with, going out on site with a clipboard, taking down details about equipment and so on and the building on paper. Then if you're very disciplined, coming back to the office and straight away beginning your analysis, but often something gets in the way. 2 weeks later you come back to your documents, difficult to understand what you've written, and it's a question of then putting that information into a spreadsheet that you might have semi-automated and doing your analysis and then copying and pasting information from that into a Word document, which is probably based on a report for a previous client, so you're remembering to change the names of taking out all the references to the previous client and so on. And it doesn't really take a genius to see that you could improve that whole process by collecting all of that information electronically out on site using a tablet, and then bringing that back to the office, uploading it onto a laptop, running some analysis, and automatically generating that report. And that's what we've done with BluePrint, and we feel that the key benefits are time saving, and that really comes in the analysis part, not necessarily out on site, where you can actually simply press generate report and all of that work is done for you, and also in the consistency and accuracy that brings across many auditors using a single tool, and also the fact that BluePrint uses a back-end database, so all of your data is stored in a database, and that gives you the potential to analyze across many different buildings or sites if you're a facilities manager or if you're doing work for such a person. What does it cost? It costs £5,250 as an initial fee, and that covers 1 year license for up to 3 users, and then there's an ongoing annual license fee of £2,500. To add more licensed users, it's 30% additionally on top of that, and that covers all support, updates and upgrades to the software as we produce them. And then there are those training costs, so basically £300 a day for training. All of those prices are excluding VAT. If you need to get in touch with us to order or for more information or whatever, software at carbondescent.org.uk. Okay, I'm now inside the software itself, and here you can see we're on the main switchboard, and it's possible here to set up the back-end database on a shared server, so you're all working on the same database. And then here we're on the organization form, and the idea here is you enter organization details, including the use category. In this case it's a restaurant, so choose restaurant and so on, and that then feeds through into a number of things such as the benchmarking that goes on, and the various things that cascade through in terms of usage profiles and so on. So once you generate an organization, a project is automatically generated. So here you can see for this school that's been renamed for anonymity, that we have a project now for Essex County Council, and it might be that you're doing 50 audits of all the primary schools in Essex for Essex County Council, and you want to do some kind of basic project management and so on, and group them together, and that's what this enables you to do. That's automatically generated. And then we go through onto audits, and if we now go to our school audit, you can see a number of options, but one of them schedule survey. So here you can say what type of survey you're going to do, and you can set up different survey types, more on that later, and say who's going to be the surveyor and so on. So my next step is to go into the actual survey data collection form, which you'll see in a minute. And here you can see I've actually already populated this survey with all of the data items that are required. So we're not now going to go through and take you through doing that, but I'm just going to whiz through and hopefully you get an overview of what is involved. So here you can see in this area here on the left hand side, you can see all the rooms in the school that I've set up. Now you don't need to set up the school in this level of detail, but there is the ability to do that if you want to do that kind of detailed audit. And the idea behind doing that is you can actually then, as you go through these different tabs, and you can see building summary, equipment, HVAC generation, controls, lighting and so on, it might be that some of these you want to say, well actually in classroom 1 we had 2 100-watt tungsten lamps, and by selecting that, when you add the information in, you're actually then assigning that data against that particular classroom. Whereas it might be that electricity use is at a site or building level, and you wish to, and if you highlight one of those, when you enter consumption data for electricity, it will then appear at the whole site level rather than at the room level. Now if you go edit site, you can see the process of actually setting this up that I've already done. So you could have a number of buildings on the site. Here I've only got one. Here you can see annual usage, and this is used throughout the audit, this process, and you can set up different annual usage profiles, and they could be anything. They might be the opening hours, the usage hours, they might be equipment, computer equipment, they might be lighting and so on, and you can set up profiles saying exactly when, what times of the year, and different pieces of equipment are used, and that information cascades through. So when you're recording information about an individual room or a building, that it automatically assumes by default these usage profiles that you've set at a room or a building level, and but you can change them as necessary. So you can see I've added in the number of classrooms, and I've actually, if we click on that, you can see I put in the floor area for each classroom, and obviously you don't need to do that kind of detail, but you may wish to, and so on. And these room names come through from the fact that this has been set up as a school, so it automatically gives us a menu of rooms that includes classrooms, computer suite and staff rooms and so on, that follow through from the fact this is a school. Okay, one of the major changes in this version of BluePrint, we're now in version 2.3, is that going back to the survey data collection form, rather than having to input electricity and fuel use manually, you can now import that electronically. So if we go import consumption data, it'll ask us, do we want to remove the old data that I've already imported? I'll say no. And here you can see the idea here is that you can import data from a spreadsheet using a number of different formats. So it might be that you've got half-hourly data, 48 data items per day, and so on for a year or 4 years or however many, whatever period. Or it might be that you've got monthly consumption data, and so it can cope, BluePrint can cope with different formats that you might have that data in for the import. I won't go through that now. It's worth noting that all of this is customizable, so it might be that you wish to go out and do a renewables audit. So in that case you might wish to create an audit, which I can show you how to do, using where there are only 3 tabs that appear here, so electricity and fuel use and renewables potential, and then you could just doing an audit about those things. So that's entirely possible, or you could add more data items. All of this can be customized and set up to how you do audits, or for different types of audits that you might potentially want to do. Now, there's a lot more to be said here, but this is a short, trying to keep this video short, so I'll move now on to the run analysis form. So we've already collected our data. We're now going through onto the run analysis form, and here you can see it's given me a little warning that I've missed some mandatory data items. I chose to set those as mandatory. You can set what you want as mandatory data items, and in this case I'm happy to ignore that, because standalone HVAC, things like fan heaters and so on, there were none, happily, in this case, in the school. So it's perfectly reasonable to move forward and through to the run analysis form. So here we are, and you can see the idea here is that we've got these 4 buttons: annual resource consumption, proposed measures, audit outputs, and finally generate report. So the idea here is that you click each of these buttons in turn and look through these tabs. Now, I've already done that, so to save time I'm going to go through that process again. I'll just flip through the tabs that have already been created here. So here you can see I've already chosen, the first step was to choose some emission factors. I've chosen some here. You might want to choose one of these or create your own, and then you'd click that button and we'd get this form appearing, and all it's doing here is calculating carbon emissions for our year, calculating total energy use. If we hadn't supplied a whole year of data, or if we'd supplied more than a year of data, it would create a year's factor up to a year's or down to a year's data here, and then use that data to produce benchmarks here. So you can see here we've got a typical primary school, and here is our actual school performing quite a bit better than the benchmark. And here you can see our imported half-hourly data. Now, the idea here is that I've already actually created different views of this data, but essentially the idea is that you can go in and actually edit this and say, well, I want to focus in on specific periods, and create a view of this. So typically you might be saying, well, you know, the buildings should be unoccupied over the weekend. Why have you got consumption going on at this period? What's being left on? And you can then save that view, and when you come to generate report, these 4 graphs will actually then appear, the views that you've created actually then appear automatically in the report, and you could potentially annotate them and so on in the Word document. Energy loads are also calculated and used in the calculations for these. So what generally the kind of crux of what we're trying to get to with an energy audit report is what can be done to reduce energy consumption and carbon emissions. And so here we have our proposed measures that are automatically generated, and those are generated intelligently. Obviously, if the only reason tungstens are CFLs are recommended is because we've said, well, there are some tungsten lumps in this building, so it's automatically recommending that they be replaced and so on. Halogens, we've said there are some halogens, so it's recommended they're replaced with LEDs and so on. So the idea here is there is a kind of manual check here to go through each of the measures that are recommended and decide, do I really want to recommend this? Is this appropriate? And am I happy with the assumptions that are being made here with these default assumptions? And particularly we've highlighted in blue the areas that you will particularly need to check. So it's pulling through all of the data from the data collection survey about these lamps, the numbers and wattages and so on, and then you can see through to things like TRVs, more efficient boiler and so on. There's a process of just checking whether you're happy with all of these assumptions, and indeed whether you want to include them at all. So you can see I've already been through and unchecked some of these, so these wouldn't actually get recommended when we click the audit outputs form, which we've already done. And then you can see this table summarizing the calculations that have been made. So the capital costs, electricity fuel savings, electricity cost savings, total cost savings, CO2, a simple payback period, and so on. So, and new in this version, a totals row. Obviously you need to be aware of any compounding issues between different measures when you use that. That can be toggled on and off. So finally it just remains to press generate report. I've already generated this report, so it's asking me do I want to overwrite it. But what it's doing now is actually pulling out all of that, or key parts of the data that you've collected about the building, and also the graphs that we've generated, the benchmark graphs and so on, and pulling them all into a Word document. You can see it's very plain at the moment, but you could customize this. The idea is that there's a template that comes with the software that you can then customize, set up with your logo and so on, and you can customize all of this in terms of what it looks like, what appears here. So you can see it's pulled through that this tabular information, the graphs, those 4 graphs, benchmark information, the benchmark graph, and then through to this information, the text that we saw against those proposed measures. Again, obviously it only recommends these things if they are if you've checked to say you want to recommend them, only pulls through this text, and if you do that, and finally through to the summary table that we saw nicely formatted. Lastly, before we finish, I just want to show you some of the customization features of BluePrint. So one of the things that you can do is to actually customize these different and create different audit types. So there's a wizard here. If you're not happy with the audit type that we've set up, you can go through, and here you can see these are the titles of the different tabs that we looked at. So you can remove these and so on, and create your own audit type with less tabs and less data and so on, all sorts of things that you can customize here. You can also then change the measures that automatically get recommended, and that final table, these are the things that appear in that recommendations table, and so on. So you can go through and customize that whole audit process. Measures, these are the default measures, but I'm sure you'll wish to add more measures, and that's entirely possible. But maybe you wish to change the default information, the capital costs, when things get recommended, and you can do that. Calculation types, so the different recommendations rely on calculations, and again these are things that you may wish to customize yourself and modify, and obviously this requires some knowledge to do this, but again this is all part of the process of being able to customize BluePrint and set it up in the way that you want. Again, through to data types, so if there's something you want to collect data on, hand dryers or something that isn't in the default data, you can create your own, or you can modify the data that's already there. So lastly, you can also create new annual usage profiles we talked about, new charge types associated with billing, add in your own staff members, and update degree data. So that, in a nutshell, is BluePrint. Thank you very much for listening.